You're calling, I believe it's +44. I think that's the UK. Go ahead. Are you where? Am I right? And where are you calling from?
Uh, hello,
Hello.
hello.
Hello. You're on.
Hi, Michael. It's Daniel from London.
Daniel, how you doing, man? Great to hear from you. What's on your mind?
Hey, great show. Bill Fletcher Jr. is amazing, man.
He's
Great guest.
amazing. He's a fucking
Uh,
treasure.
hello.
Hello, you're here. We hear you.
Okay, it just cut off a bit. I just wanted to bring something up on Marilena Chauí, this leftist philosopher from Brazil. Uh, I'll just try to get her argument right and maybe have you guys comment on it because I found it very interesting and quite apropos of our times. And her argument basically goes around uh, saying that neoliberalism is a form of totalitarianism because in totalitarian societies, it's not about the Il Duce being a clown on a podium. It's about the everything within a state. The it's about the society functioning as a whole, right? As one
Hmm.
organism, so to speak.
Yeah.
And what she says is that in the neoliberal form of societal arrangements, everything is a business model. So
Hmm.
from a hospital to an individual, the whole Homo economicus mentality, right? You develop yourself, you make you function in a market with a market logic, right? Um, and what be, because of this, the way these things function, conflict cannot manifest itself, and the way to solve conflict in this type of society is through the justice system.
Hmm.
And we talk we talk about Brazil all the time and how the justice system is screwed up over there, and it
Right.
has always been like that. Most of the judges that are active today were judges during the military period, so we inherited that system. But it's not an exclusivity of Brazil, right? In
Right.
the U.S., there's the Trump administration is backing the courts of these
Yep.
justices, these conservatives. So
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
with all this background, how do we, as people with a revolutionary mentality, even understanding that there's the material conditions and also that revolutions are not something that spontaneously just come up, right? These are things that are built. But anyway, how do we, accepting that the legitimacy of a justice system that is so classist and class based
Right.
and that rules in terms of class interests, how do we how can we win? That's the question in Brazil, in the US and anywhere else.
No doubt. All right, David, you want to take a hack at this first?
Yeah, I just have a couple things that I was thinking about during your call. Just one very specific. It's like if you ever have the chance, everyone should read. There's a great book by Alain Badiou called "In Praise of Love," and he's
Yeah.
Alain Badiou is a very important French philosopher, communist philosopher, and a lot of his work in this book, he's reacting to what he's seeing, where even love, the interpersonal relationship between two people, something that is both very public but is also very private and intimate, is becoming a commodity and commodified. He's very worried. For example, he sees these advertisements for dating apps in Paris, and they promise you to fall in love without the fall, right? Because when you fall in love with somebody, it's a very violent thing. Actually, it can pull you apart from your job, your responsibilities, and all these things.
Not unless you're crushing it.
So Badou's very, is very worried about this, because basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to take away this interruption to like the capitalist hegemony what we're all living in. And, where he comes across in this very French, it's very romantic, forgive me. But he's like, to fall in love and to be, in love, that's a very revolutionary thing. And it's something that's very important. And I say that because when we have a force and a system that is all across the board trying to infect, even like the very basic nature of human relations, and trying to say that, no, we are just economic subjects, right? Refusing that is a place where we can start to break those chains. And what comes from that is that's where you have an event. And those are those moments where you do get to make a choice, right? Because yes, under capitalism, you don't have these kind of individual choices, right? Where every day you can walk out and say like, I refuse capitalism. Well, no, you have to eat, you have to participate in the market, right? But you agitate and you refuse it in enough places of your life, and people continue to do that. They join revolutionary groups and continue that agitation until you have that event. And that event is sort of that moment where, capitalist power is very weak and anything is possible.
And this is another reason to step out of the vampire castle.
Yes.
Because all of that, like, not saving, first of all, it's a catastrophe in two ways, because it undermines the fact that there are a handful of people, but mainly institutions, but some people who are so entwined with those institutions that really need to be, got at. In a way that's extremely politically aggressive. And then, of course, there's occasionally, obviously, some people, do things that are outside of the pale, whatever. But then there's like this much broader reality that it's a collective endeavor. We're all incredibly imperfect people. We all make mistakes, and we all need to work on each other and improve and help each other and have each other's backs. And part of the thing that the vampire castle is not only profoundly emotionally toxic and intellectually limited and a failed political project, it also, and Megan Day's made this point a lot, it's another way that it mirrors neoliberalism, because these fights that look so important are actually, some of it's sincere and important, some of it's sincere and misguided, and a lot of it is actually using the rhetoric of liberation as proxies for market space and destruction of other people to like solidify your brand. So I actually like the direction Griscom's coming in, that you actually really, the anarchist ethos of like the 90s really overstated it because they ignored actual power. But conversely, I do think you actually need to create these greenhouses and these ecosystems where you are in your practices stepping out of the logic that we're living under. And that includes, love, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, complexity, all sorts of these things, which can sound very, even as I say it, I have the same reaction you did. I kind of recoil. It sounds soft. It sounds romantic. It sounds French, but it's true. And it's really important. And then I think conversely, and then I get to Matt, because I know Matt will have a good historical frame for this, if I'm not being presumptuous. But I think that the flip side of that is there's all of these cultural lessons that have to do with, I feel comfortable using the word spirituality, in fact, that have to do with how we are, how we're being, how we're treating each other, our humility, all of these things. And then conversely, the left globally, and definitely in the United States, and clearly also in Brazil, needs a way more rigorous and serious strategy on the courts. And I don't know what that answer is, because right now we've been caught in between, in a very narrow liberal sense. I think in the United States, people actually got too used to the courts. Like, the courts will solidify somebody's rights, not the social movement that brought about the rights, right? And that's a huge mistake. And then conversely, there were other people that, and maybe, and look, to be fair, this is the most empathetic thing I will say to like a Jill Stein voter, and I don't have much empathy for them usually, but it's like, yes, every election cycle, that's what Democrats do. They say you got to vote for us no matter how terrible we are because of the courts. And some people have gotten sick of it. Now, it's still a major miscalculation. They might literally make abortion illegal in a matter of days, right? That's but I understand the way in which it was misused to get people's votes. But that being said, the whole contingent of the left that ignored and negated the relentless power of the courts was delusional. It was wrong. But then add a third thing to the mix, and I want to be really clear. I don't think he had any other choice in the context he was in. But part of what the tragedy and the travesty and the grotesqueness of the imprisonment of Lula is his trusting I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming he's a lot more. I think Lula's incredibly savvy, but he chose the rhetorical strategy of trusting the justice system when at the same time he was articulating, and everybody in the Workers' Party was articulating, and anybody who understands the issue is articulating, this is a lawfare political persecution. So obviously these things are totally rigged. So that's put the left forces in another weird position. I don't know the answer to it. I could just say, I mean, this is too generic, but it's like there needs to be a left strategy on the courts that's incredibly rigorous, that recognizes the limitations of the present, but also has an aggressive strategy to expand the horizons of the future because they are undemocratic.
Yeah, I mean, there basically needs to be a counter-revolution to what Quinn Slobodian outlines in The Globalists. Because that was an active project, and it's going to take that. And the reason they knew it was going to be so effective for them is because it obviously depoliticized it. But we're talking about Bill Fletcher being a good communicator, and to kind of build off Griscom's point, communication is actually where it's at. It's not some great ideas out there that need to just be brought to the people. Like, you need to have an interaction between the people and these ideas, and that's actually where it's at. I guess that's all I have to say.
No, I think that's precisely it, and I actually think it's another example, frankly, in which we do need to learn from all of these horrible hegemonic forces that have created this hellscape we're in, which is that they think very strategically, they think very long term, and actually in their own demonic way, they think in a very utopian terms. So we do need to think, just as we're enacting in our own spaces where we can practice a different value set of what it means to be human outside of the market dictatorship, I think, we need to say, like, what are the rules of the road? What is the legal framework we need? That's the decades-long process. In the short term, the short-term answer is much more relative, which is you need to in the United States, you need to elect Democrats who are forced and pressured to stuff the courts with liberal justices. I mean, boring, workmanlike, also true. And I think,
True.
and I definitely think on the Supreme Court, term limits, court packing, the Supreme Court at the bare minimum needs term limits. It's just such a catastrophically undemocratic.
Yeah, that was his intention too.
And it was precisely, that was its intention. Definitely. These are and what's been funny about the courts, is like, in at least in the United States I could speak to, is like that dual function of, on one hand, they've been forces of aristocracy and anti-democracy, or they've just been lagging indicators on democratic sentiment. And, where they sort of like codify an emerging sort of social sort of consensus on something. And frankly, and both of those functions need to be checked by democratic will. I mean, neither of those things are good. We don't need, of course I was thrilled when it came down, but and the way it was, and yes, in some sense, you do need the court to say marriage equality is the law of the land, because a lot of states would still treat gay people as second-class citizens. And at the same time, conversely, ultimately, the political project of ensuring that women have autonomy over their bodies, or gay people have full civil rights protections, needs to be fortified in a democratic will. Now, there's a dialectic, because on the other hand, yes, there is an important function where the court can step in and restrain abuse of a minority. That's a real thing. That's actually the type of liberal value that I think you can't just junk and be glib about. But overall, if you're trying to build a consensus and really root things in a society, they have to come from a broader democratic buy-in.
Yeah, and with regards to that whole protecting the minority thing, the game to watch here is to not let neoliberals or whatever the next iteration is, define rich person as a minority, which is specifically what like the
100%.
Buchanan school wants to do.
If you read Democracy and Change, that's the whole. They actually tell a funhouse Marxism. They just invert it. Rich people are exploited. It's demented. Yeah.
Yeah.
David.
I mean, it's just you know, and the minority issue too is this country just the Supreme Court has a terrible track record when it comes to that. So that's one of those things, like that's something that gets brought up a lot when I sort of come up with it, more like structural philosophical criticisms of the Supreme Court. It's like, oh, what about the protection of minority? Well, yes, I agree with that, you know, but that's not been the practice. And the point is that if we were to have a society where the Supreme Court was actively involving itself in protecting minorities, we would have a lot stronger political power across the country for the left. And this is the problem with the way that a lot of people think about the Supreme Court, is that the Supreme Court is just going to develop on its own without a political movement that brings in that way. And that's what we need to create.
Precisely. And by the way, those wins you're talking about were when those movements were happening. It's not a coincidence that the great civil rights cases that people talk about in the 50s and 60s, right. MLK was the most important non-elected official in the country at that point. Of course, yes.
Yeah, it
precisely.
Is. I think Ian Millhiser's book goes into this, that it's very, well, when it does good things, it's because it is that bit sensitive to political pressure from the demos. Precisely. But, I mean, that's not obviously the ruling force behind it.
Does that answer anything, Daniel? We went all over the place.
Oh, that's great takes. Great takes. Thanks for the show, and thanks for keeping it real with Brazil, man. We need every help we can get.
Oh, much appreciated, man. Thank you so much. Lula Livre.
Lula Livre.
Thank you.
We started with the communist philosopher on love and ended with the strategy for winning the Supreme Court of the United States.
That's how
pretty wide range.
That's how awesome the show is.
I like it.
That's it. If everybody watching and listening to this show could have a fluency in French Maoism and judicial strategy and electoral politics, we're definitely fulfilling our mandate. You just enjoyed that Michael Brooks Show video, and you can get a lot more by subscribing to us here at the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel. It's literally right there.